Hello and welcome. My name is Errity Green and this is Wise Women Television, and today I am bringing you a pick a card reading on the gifts from your father. So this is wisdom gained and lessons learned from your father. Now oftentimes we learn our lessons through the opposite. So if you're finding that your father did not teach you this directly, it very well may have happened indirectly through its opposite, meaning they did something that you are learning not to do, or they didn't do something and you're learning to do that. So you might not find that it's a one-to-one correspondence. You'll find that these were lessons that you learned from the experience, no matter which form it took, or lessons you're meant to learn. Or that you were spiritually contracted to learn through this relationship. So all of that being said, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you find that you enjoy this reading, that you like this reading, I encourage you to like, to subscribe, to press the bell icon. That way you're notified every single time a reading pops up. I want to let you know that I do offer both personal readings as well as coaching programs to support you in your life, in your work, and on your spiritual path. Right now I have an incredible program out called Spirit Woman. It's a year-long community to nurture your true nature and your highest potential. You can check out those details below or at erritygreen.com/spiritwoman. So without further ado, I will put a picture up now of your 3 card piles to choose from today. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Card pile 1, the gifts from your father, wisdom gained and lessons learned. So your father taught you how to fight for what you believe in, fight for what you want, fight for you, fight for, this is going to be self-advocacy, fight for your vision, fight for what you want. It helped give you a voice. It strengthened your voice. It strengthened yourself. Now, for some of you, this could be because as a child, you might have felt in some form or another, this isn't going to be the case for everybody, but you might very well have felt victimized by your own father. Perhaps they were aggressive or even violent, but it taught you to have a voice, and it taught you to advocate for yourself, and it taught you to stand your ground. Now, you may not have done that with your father, right? Like we said, this is not always a one-to-one correspondence. Sometimes we learn it because of that experience. Maybe you didn't have a voice then, but you do now. But he taught you to, and I think some of you too, I'm feeling it, that you were taught directly. Your father sort of sat you down or modeled this for you, or really wanted you to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and be able to fight for yourself. Didn't matter what it was for, but if someone had done you wrong, you fight for yourself and you do what's right to take care of yourself. Or if something wasn't going right or the way that you know it should be, that you would fight for that. But one way or another, your father, whether indirectly or directly, taught you how to fight for yourself and to follow your dreams. That you weren't meant to just settle for less or accept the compromise, or sometimes we take scraps, like for whatever reason during childhood, whether it be worthiness or other issues, any number of issues kind of lead to that experience of, oh, I'll just settle for less. I'll accept scraps. Whatever I can get, I'll take what I can get. And your father, whether directly or indirectly, taught you to not only fight for what you believe in and fight for what you deserve, but to not settle for less and to fight for your dreams, to fight for what you know is yours, to fight for what you deserve. And I know I already said that, but it just is coming up again. So they very much taught you to be that fighter, to be that advocate for yourself. Now, I do also believe that these next cards here are showing, I feel like some of you, your father may have had bouts of depression, maybe even mental illness, or suffered from some kind of maybe trauma history or abusive history themselves, but in one way or another, they were heartbroken. Could it have been the loss of a relationship and a divorce? Yes. Childhood issues? Yes. Maybe just difficulty. A lot of the generations prior to us dealt with a lot of war and trauma and things like that we really haven't had to experience. And perhaps they were still sort of tending to those wounds. But I feel like in some way, again, whether directly or indirectly, they don't want you to suffer from that. They wanted, or what you can learn or are intended to learn or maybe have learned, is to grow from that and to not let it keep you down or get you down, not to sort of burrow yourself away into a hole and disappear from the world and hide under a rock scared of what life could do to you. Maybe it'll hurt you again, right? It was much more of this energy of, and you may or may not be embodying this now or yet, but to not let life get you down so much to where you become depressed, lonely, and you turn away from the world because of your deep heartbreak. You know, instead, they wanted you to embody this energy spiritually. Maybe they haven't taught you this directly, but to embody that energy of playfulness and to not let the difficulties and challenges of the world get you down or get you down for too long. And there isn't this energy of like just neglecting or ignoring problems or spiritual bypassing or any of that, but to not resign to giving up, to not resign to loneliness or solitude or being alone forever, you know, and if you want to be alone forever, that's fine too, but that you don't sort of resign to this energy of heartbreak, of heartache, of giving up, of resignation. Again, to fight for what you believe in, fight for what's yours, fight for your happiness, fight for your joy, fight for what you deserve. You aren't meant to be swallowed by grief. You aren't meant to be swallowed by the trauma of life, the circumstances and challenges of life. What you're intended to learn from this experience, even if your father did suffer from that, you are meant to expand into that return to innocence, to be able to be playful again, to be able to feel alive again, to be able to be happy and joyous again, to be able to live free again, to be able to open your heart again. You're meant to be able to learn from, whether it was direct or indirect from your father, that to not give up and to let life move on and to allow yourself to experience joy. This is so cool. Your father wanted you to be able to follow your heart, to follow your joy, to live true to what you want. And we're getting a lot of that energy, right? It's like that sort of encouraging energy to keep going, follow your heart, fight for what you believe in. Don't give up, stay the course, be true to yourself, be true to your heart, be true to your joy, be true to your vision, live authentically, be yourself. They would support you no matter which way you went, whether or not they subscribe to it themselves, whatever life path or belief system or value system you occupy. Regardless of that, they would have your back or support you no matter what. And even if that isn't your father, that is what you are intended to learn from your father. So it's, again, following your heart and not, again, settling for less or compromising or saying, oh, okay, I'll just take the scraps or whatever life has to offer me. Sure, they really want you to embody your fullest potential, whether or not they ever said that. Again, a lot of this can be indirect, but it's a matter of honoring your desires, honoring what is true and real for you. And even if your father didn't, they want that for you. And even if they don't, and you're convinced that they don't, that's what you're meant to learn from them spiritually at a deeper level. Yeah, they want you to be able to journey and venture beyond the known, beyond the comfort zone, beyond the heartbreak, beyond the old cycles, beyond the old, what am I even saying? Beyond the old cycles, beyond the old pain, beyond the old patterns, beyond the old comfort zone or beyond the comfort zone. You're not meant to remain in the box. And I feel like for a lot of you, this isn't going to be everybody, but for a lot of you, perhaps your father chose that resignation or chose to remain in their comfort zone or didn't pursue that bigger vision, didn't seek out more, didn't seek out what they really felt was theirs. And for whatever reason, maybe felt like they missed out or they didn't fully actualize themselves. But they want that for you. And that's what you're meant to do. That's what's going to bring, it's interesting because that's the thing that would complete them. If they were to venture outside of their comfort zone or do the thing that they know they're meant to do or want to do, or follow their own dreams, follow their own heart, if they would do that, and if they have, excellent, but if they haven't done it, if they were to do it, that would complete them. That's what they've always wanted. That's their missing piece. And yet, that's what you're going to do. You're going to be the one where they've passed you the torch. Not that their time is up. If they've since passed, that's okay too. But for some of you, they have resigned and they know that, and they're not going to pursue their dreams or their joy or any of that, and they've probably accepted it, or maybe they haven't. Maybe they're miserable. I'm not feeling that energy for a lot of people, but I'm saying that is, we saw the heartbreak wound and kind of giving up on life, giving up on relationships, just saying F it kind of thing. But they want more for you. They want you to trust yourself to journey beyond what is safe, what's comfortable, what's familiar. Again, they want you to push and be that frontier onto that new frontier, the edge of life, to be able to create more, be more, experience more, fight for what you want, fight for what you deserve. They really want that for you, because even though they didn't get it, you're intended to. So that's what's intended for you, and those are the gifts from your father. So card pile 1, I want to thank you for listening. If you liked this video, I encourage you to like, to subscribe, to press the bell icon. That way you receive notifications every single time a reading pops up. And of course, I have Spirit Woman out right now. You can find out those details below or at erritygreen.com/spiritwoman. Thank you, card pile 1. Okay, card pile 2, gifts from your father. So these are either direct or indirect lessons learned, wisdom gained, whether or not it was a one-to-one correspondence. Most of the time we're learning by the opposite of the way our parents lived. Okay, so they want you to become an active participant in your life. They want you to choose. They want you to be true to yourself. They don't want you to, there's something here about running away from what you want, from running away from what you deserve. I actually feel a lot of emotional energy here. So perhaps some of you have had a history of abusive or toxic or unhealthy relationships, and boy, do they want more for you. Now, I am feeling like your father very well may have, for some of you, been an abusive or toxic, unhealthy or dysfunctional man in and of himself. Perhaps he suffered from substance abuse or trauma and abuse himself and then became an abuser. That's not going to be the case for everyone, obviously, but I do feel that. So if I do, I want to give words to it. But one way or another, he wants it for you, and if not as his human identity, as his soul. And this was, if you subscribe to it, you know, spiritual contract or an agreement between the two of you. He wanted you to leave the past behind, leave the old cycles behind, all the limitation, all the things that told you you were less than or less than worthy or less than deserving. He never wanted that for you. And he wants you to finally own and honor all that you deserve. And it's interesting, this is similar to card pile 1, but a very different flavor. It's like two spices that are similar, but totally different. You know what I mean? So very similar. If card pile 1 called to you, it might be worthwhile to check that out, but there is a little bit of a different flavor here. I'm kind of getting that vibe of small town. This might not be the case for everyone, but small town, everybody knows each other. Daughter getting in relationships that probably aren't ideal or great for her as a teenager, and this just continues into adulthood. Please apply the energy and the examples I'm giving to your own circumstances. That way I don't have to give disclaimers every few minutes. But I do want you to know that if you chose this reading, it's for you. And you have to trust that what's coming through is also for you, but you have to apply the energy to your own circumstances. But your father never wanted you, and like what you're meant to learn is to not stay small town, to not be the woman who's in that typical dysfunctional relationship or abusive relationship or toxic relationship because she doesn't know her worth or her own value. What you're meant to learn from your father is that you do different, that you run as far away as possible from that small town mentality or that small town life or that small town version of you, that limited version of you, the part of you that it does engage in toxic behavior or within toxic relationships. You know, you're meant to leave that behind, and you're meant to be more, to, you know, become more of yourself, realize and actualize more of who you actually are beyond all that toxicity. You know, your father was meant to support you to grow from him, grow beyond him, expand far beyond him. Spiritually, you know, he never wanted you to be with someone who was like him if he was violent, if he was toxic, if he was abusive, if he was dysfunctional, if he was unhealthy in some way. He always wanted you, at least spiritually, at a deep level, to be able to choose partners wisely, to choose relationships wisely, to take good care of yourself, to honor your worth and value, and to see yourself for all that you are. And again, I already gave some examples of like small town daughter and all that stuff, but you don't have to be a woman. You don't have to identify as a woman. You have to apply it to your circumstance. But above all, what you're meant to learn from your father is to do differently, to step away from old cycles and patterns, even familial or generational cycles and patterns, to choose you, to prioritize you, to honor and value you, and to not choose those more limited versions of yourself, kind of like to be and do all you can be and do, right? Kind of that vibe of being an active participant in your life and to change things for the better, to do better, again, to do beyond those old cycles and old patterns. You were always too big for sort of like that small town life or that small town version of you. And there's nothing wrong with small town. I came from a small town. I love a good small town. I prefer to be in a small town. So it's not like there's any kind of judgment or evaluation there. It's like you recognizing What is that small town version of you? And then recognizing who you are in your totality and how you might be able to expand more into your totality and your wholeness, as opposed to just that limited version of you that is showing in some ways or cases has left you unsatisfied, unfulfilled, and feeling maybe less than, and not truly honoring your worth, value, and what's possible all around, what's possible for you. Yeah. Look at this. You're meant to change. You're meant to transform. I'm feeling, again, that family cycle, that generational cycle, that generational patterning. You are meant to shift out of that. You're meant to be the cycle breaker. You're meant to step into more abundance. You're meant to leave that small town, whether it's actually physically, geographically, or if it's just metaphoric and figurative, like you leave that self or that version or those relationships or those toxicities behind, and you expand into all that you are, that you came here to do different, to be different, to not be that same old thing, that same old cog in the wheel where everyone kind of falls into place or their role in this family or in this small town where, you know, kind of those old cycles have a lot of momentum. And as the dominoes fall, you know, the kids, whoever it is in the town, kind of take up where their parents left off and keep it going. That's not what you came here for. You came for drastic transformation and to help shift this family and these patterns out of the norm, but also to live in more abundance, truer to all that you are, truer to your higher potential, truer to your soul and your spiritual calling. Yeah, look, another leaving behind card. Okay, so I think there's a part of you, for those of you, there's a part of you that wants something different with your father, and it's what's creating this dynamic of maybe even dysfunction, toxicity, or just some kind of lack of health and fulfillment or satisfaction and love in your romantic partnerships. It's like you are yearning for your father and this reconnection or rekindling with your father, and because you're not finding that, you sort of seek out the next best thing. And again, for many of you, I didn't feel this for all of you. It might not be the case. Again, apply it as you will. But if your father was someone who was toxic or unhealthy or kind of following along with those generational patterns, like we said, you know, you might not have gotten everything you wanted from your father. And so in leaving the family behind in whatever way and then seeking out romantic relationships, you might well still be playing out that same old pattern, that same old role. And ultimately you're actually longing for him. And that's my dog growling. I might have to pause this. Chikuma, that's enough. I might have to pause this. He doesn't like hearing people talk. So I have my mouth too. A lot of things happening right now. So anyway, you're meant to leave all of that behind. And you're also meant to leave that hope, that longing, that yearning, that waiting for dad to come around or to be different or to do different or show you something different, to let that go, to let that be. I know that's much easier said than done, and that looks way easier on paper than it does in real life. But even if it's just acceptance and saying, this is the way it is, or this is the way it was, and now what? Yes, this, and now what? This might have happened, or this might be the way it is, and now what? It doesn't mean that you don't honor or value that relationship or connection, or that you don't always want more, but you're just accepting it. So you're not living out this longing and yearning and perpetually now recreating these patterns and going out trying to find your father in these other relationships, which just leads you to more pain, to more suffering, and ultimately lack of fulfillment. Yeah, so look, this woman says melting masks. So leaving behind those old facades, that's not the truth of you. Any kind of toxicity or dysfunction or whatever was never the truth of you. That family history, that small town mentality, that limited version of you was never the truth of you. You're wearing that attire, or maybe you wore that attire. That's what you have now expanded out of. But I feel like a lot of you, you know, the energy is that this is still present in some way. So a lot of you are shifting out of this now, or will be, or will be making the choice to, ideally. And so, you know, there's this recognition, like what you learned from your father, the gifts from your father, is to see who you are beyond all of that, to see who you are beyond the longing for this connection or relationship with your father, to see who you are beyond your family and generational patterning and cycles, to see who you are beyond like these old belief systems and value systems, all that stuff that really isn't true for you. You might not have done the self-discovery work that a lot of people do, because kind of living unconsciously and in those old patterns and in those old relationships, you don't usually find yourself. You usually just keep on repeating the old pattern. Usually there's a rock bottom or some kind of clearing that happens where you then have to take a really good look at your life and reevaluate and make new choices. I don't know if you've had that experience yet, but the gift from your father is ultimately to live more authentic to who you truly are and what you truly deserve. And you were meant to step out of this cycle and out of this pattern, and just kind of shows ordinariness, live an ordinary life. But to me, what that is that fulfillment, that peace of mind, that simplicity, health, wellness, of just, not living in those old cycles, those old patterns, whether toxic, dysfunctional, even just unhealthy or unfulfilling. You're not meant to play out that role anymore, or to take on that patterning from previous generations. You're meant to leave that behind. It was never something for you to wear for the duration of your life ever. It was always intended that you took that off. It was always intended that that might have been your attire, your clothing, your outfit for the day or for a season or for several years, but you were always meant to change out of that outfit. You were always meant to take that mask off. It was never meant to be yours. It was something that was meant to teach you about stepping out of limitation and familial and generational cycles and stepping into what you truly deserve, more of your authentic self. But even especially breaking through toxic, especially, but any kind of patterning through our families and generations. You were meant to step out of that and be that cycle breaker. So that's the gift from your father, card pile 2. If you like this reading, I encourage you to like, to subscribe, to press the bell icon. That way you're notified anytime a reading pops up. I have Spirit Woman enrolling now. You can check out those details below or at erritygreen.com/spiritwoman. Thank you, card pile 2. Okay, card pile 3, the gifts from your father. So again, these can be direct or indirect lessons. It's not always going to be a one-to-one correspondence, like he taught you this directly and you learned it. It can very much be like I opened the opposing thing. They didn't do this, but this is what you're meant to take from it. Okay, so I feel like you're meant to, there's something here about, I feel like this is more of the spiritual, we'll get to it, but the spiritual path, the spiritual awakening path, seeing beyond your own humanity, seeing your true roots, your true seeds, the truth of your totality of all that you are, your wholeness, who you are beyond your ego identity, who you are beyond the human identity. You might, obviously you have a name and you have whatever you call yourself, who you are beyond that name, with that history, with that conditioning, with those parents, with that family, with that social status, on and on. The gift from your father is that you were always meant to shed that you were always meant to expand beyond that you were always meant to at one point drop that and become something much, much greater. And there is no hierarchy. Our spiritual selves are not better than our human selves. We're all one and the frickin' same, but you were meant in this lifetime, one of the gifts from your father, again, whether they did this or not, in some way or another, there's a spiritual contract here, and we might get to through the other layers of the reading as to how they set the stage for this. But you were always meant to shed that skin and return home to yourself, the totality of you, the spiritual you, who you are truly, deeply, uniquely. You were always meant to come home to yourself. The gift from your father was for you to have a spiritual awakening, some kind of spiritual enlightenment, some kind of spiritual journey, such that you became much greater than just that ego identity, much greater than that name that you have or that name that you carry, much greater than any kind of familial or generational cycles. I do feel pretty powerful energy for a lot of you in card pile 3, such that you might even find yourself deeply in spiritual practice at some point in your life, if not already, or that some of you might have traveled to a remote place in the world and studied with or mentored with gurus or indigenous cultures and tribes and so on and so forth. Maybe became monks. Some of you became spiritual leaders, spiritual teachers, or just someone who identifies more with the totality of all that they are, less with the material world, more with the spiritual world. And yeah, you've matured and blossomed more there. So you might identify more with your spiritual self or your spiritual side, the spiritual world, your soul, seeing beyond the limitation of the human eyes. So you were always meant to have the spiritual awakening. For many of this has already happened. You already know this. You're already well practiced and well along the path. I won't say further along in the path, but it feels well along the path, well underway. When I say this, it's not a surprise to you. You're like, oh my gosh, wow, that's neat. He was always meant to support you, whether directly or indirectly, and stepping into a greater embodiment of all that you are, this greater spiritual awakening. Yeah. Do we have two different cards here that are both speaking to transition, transformation. Look at that. And actually we have this one too, like a lot of flowering, maturing, blossoming, expanding, awakening. Then we have the transformation and transition cards. So there is a message here of almost like they always saw this at a deep level. It kind of gives me a little bit of emotion, actually. They always saw you for who you were, and they always knew. Now, they may not have ever said this to you, and I don't think that they have. The energy feels like they have not. But they always knew that you were different. Trying not to cry. They always saw something very special in you, a light in you, and they knew very well what you are, what you're here to do, who you're meant to be. They have always seen a special light in you, or special uniqueness, or some kind of gift. They've always known you were different. I don't know that they always knew exactly what that was, or what form that would take, or what that would mean for you, or even for them. But at a deep level, it was soul to soul recognition, and they knew exactly who you were. Guys, these card readings lately. Okay. Pulling myself together. Again, I try not to edit this stuff out, because one of my primary values is authenticity, and I don't want this to be something where, well, let's just edit out the emotion. That makes no sense to me, especially when I'm really connected to more feminine values, and that's something that I've worked my ass off to come into myself. So I want to be honest with you, and part of the honesty is being real in my readings. So I feel like at a deep soul level or spiritual level, you guys, how am I going to get through this reading? Okay, I will take a break if I have to. Okay, card pile 3. They have always connected with you spiritually. I feel like you have some kind of soul or spiritual connection with your father. Perhaps you're both star seeds, part of the same spiritual tribe. What do they call it? Soul family, soul tribe, where groups of souls tend to incarnate together, and they come into lives and come into human form and come onto the earth around the same time, and tend to like run into each other, and whatever kind of relationship or interaction that they have. Whether or not that part is true, it very well may be true. There is some kind of deep spiritual soul connection with your father. And I do feel like whether or not you've been incarnated before in human or physical form on earth together, feels like some of you, or at least many of you have some kind of work, spiritual work behind the scenes. So beyond the veil, beyond planet Earth, maybe you guys are starseeds on another planet if you subscribe to that belief system, or angels who work side by side. I don't know, but there is a really deep soul-to-soul recognition here and honoring, and that when you were born, your father knew exactly who you were. And whether he has the guts and even the words or the knowingness consciously and explicitly to be able to share that with you directly, he knows, and he knows deeply. In fact, your father is a very spiritually gifted person. Makes me want to cry some more. He's a very gifted spiritual person. I don't know if he tells you this stuff. I don't know if you know this, but I feel like there is, again, that soul-to-soul recognition and validation between each other. Unspoken, unsaid, if not explicitly discussed. But I do feel like they are gifted spiritually. I feel like some of it may be clouded. Maybe they just aren't fully aware of it. Maybe they haven't fully discovered it. Maybe they haven't created space for it. And again, it's like that quiet knowingness that really isn't explicitly or consciously shared, but known. And so through this deeper spiritual connection that you both share, the gift from your father is your own spiritual knowingness, your own spiritual gifts, your blossoming and maturing on your spiritual path, your greater spiritual awakening and realization, and so on and so forth. This is ultimately what your father is supporting you with, whether directly or indirectly. He may not even know it. This might just be part of your spiritual plan, your spiritual agreement. Yeah, starting to know who you are. You were always meant to, again, we've already said this, but we'll make sure we touch on these other cards. You were always meant to come to a greater understanding of who you are in your totality. You were always meant to awaken to the spiritual path, to the spiritual side of you, to become more awakened, alert, aware, truer to who you are ultimately, that you were meant to go down this path of questioning or inquiry or discovery or experimentation, where you then come to this greater understanding and even integration and embodiment of your greater spiritual identity, persona, soul being lived out in the flesh, spirit being lived out in the flesh. This was always meant to be something that would occur for you, written in the stars, as they say. So let me see. Yeah. So a couple things here too is that, what I'm getting with these final couple of cards. One second. So I have other videos going and uploading and all sorts of stuff. So you might have heard another video. that I'm working on, that's being edited right now and just finished. So you were always meant to come into all that you are, to walk a bigger, bolder, brighter path, to really own your human side, but also your spiritual side. And again, it feels like that in the world, not of the world, to really be connected more so to your spiritual embodiment, and sort of use the human identity as your vessel, you know, as your walkthrough, as your whatever, like, this is my vessel, this is my instrument, but I'm here to do spiritual work, and ultimately I'm a spiritual being. And I see that, I recognize that, and I'm really going to focus on the spiritual side and bring more of this to earth. So I really feel like that was a part of your plan / path, and it's what your father was meant to give over to you, sort of pass the torch. And part of this awakening was almost like, because he was just, even just his presence and being around, because he was a part of your soul family, your soul tribe, starseed, whatever you might subscribe to, whatever kind of lands or resonates in that regard, it's like just his presence being there was kindling a flame inside of you that eventually would come into a full raging fire. Maybe not raging, but healthy, very healthy fire, fully expressed fire, that again would come into greater beingness as you matured and walked this path of inquiry, self-discovery, self-awakening, and so on and so forth. Now, what I'm getting with this card, though, which is pretty interesting right here, it's almost like, again, that agreement. You take a look at those guys and they're kind of, what is it, like touching pinkies? And what I'm getting from that is like this agreement with your father of, we're both here. Look at how they're almost twins. They look alike. We're both here as spiritual beings, sort of doing the same thing. And yet it looks like one of you was going to walk a different path than the other. So that, again, this makes me wonder, makes me feel like your father might not be who who you would imagine is, or who you would call spiritually awakened. You know, they might be kind of turning the other way, maybe focusing on their own humanity, or in some way, again, some of this is clouded or they're unaware. And yet you guys were always on the same page all along, spiritually at a deeper level, but you kind of chose to go one way and they chose to go the other. And yet it was agreed upon from the very beginning. It was all meant to be. Everything is unfolding as it should. So your gift from your father, card pile 3, is your spiritual path, your spiritual awakening. And ultimately, like I said, many of you are well practiced in this. You're already aware of this. Some of you are spiritual leaders, again, spiritual teachers, but in some way have really owned the totality of your being. And you don't really walk on earth primarily or even exclusively as your human identity. You walk as a soul on earth. And that was always a part of the plan. I do want to pull a final card, though, and see if there's anything else we can gather. I just feel like there's maybe a need for a clarifier, just because I'm curious for you, and I will bring that to you in just a moment. So nothing truly revelatory, but perhaps your father remains in the past and kind of holds on to that human identity, those human cycles, that human patterning, which we've touched on. You were always meant to expand beyond that, to do that self-inquiry, that self-discovery, that spiritual awakening, do the work that they never did. You know, they passed you the torch, and you were meant to take it even further than them. And so if you were on that path and doing that, which I imagine you are because you're listening and you're here, this is what you're meant to do, is to carry that torch and to continue the spiritual work. So thank you, card pile 3. If you like this video, I encourage you to like, to subscribe, to press the bell icon. That way you receive notifications moving forward. And then I also want to let you know I am offering Spirit Woman. It's out right now. It's currently enrolling. You can find out those details below or at erritygreen.com/spiritwoman. Thank you, card pile 3.